Welcome to Defining Transparency. The transparency revolution is upon us, and I am ever so grateful to have a dear friend, Nathana Sharma, join us. I am the host, Paul Pagnato, and the author of Transparency Wave. The podcast can be accessed on a dozen different methodologies and ways, from Google Play, iTunes, and a host of others. So, Nathana, thank you so much for joining us. For the listeners, I just want to give some background. Nathana is just a superstar and one of the most impact-based human beings I know. Nathana is currently the general counsel at Labelbox. Most recently was a faculty member of Singularity University, where I had the distinct pleasure of meeting and being taught by Nathana. Has been ranked and rated as the top 5 expert in the world on blockchain and digital assets, and a graduate of the Yale Law School and the School of Business, received an MBA. So thank you so much for joining us, Nathana. I know transparency is a passion of yours. You live and breathe it every day in your life and in business and the community, and just grateful to have a dialogue with you about it.
Well, it's such an honor and pleasure to be here with you, Paul. And I think that we're living in times of such fast change, and transparency is a key methodology for surfing those waves in a way that can make businesses and individuals stronger.
Oh, for sure. So, transparency means so many things to so many different people. So we could talk about transparency on a personal level and personal transparency. We could talk about transparency in a corporate culture, a corporate environment, transparency as a company communicates to the public, transparency as it relates to community involvement, to governments and NGOs. So it can be overwhelming for someone when they think about transparency. So just curious, when you think about transparency, how do you define it, and what does it mean to you?
I think that transparency for me is highly connected with ethics and agency, and a belief and value emphasis on human sovereignty. So what I mean by all that is, the world is complex. There's so much information and data out there. But the more that we interrogate and work on our principles of reasoning, and the more that we have access to the facts as best people understand them, the better decisions we can make as individuals and as a society. And respect for one's own agency and the agency of others means that the more that one can be transparent, tell it like it is, and share one's best knowledge with one's fellow people, the more that people can collaborate and cooperate and create a better future together. I think the opposite of transparency is when people hide information or data, and they might think they're doing that for the public good, but often that can be motivated by self-interest. And either way, when information is not clearly shared, you don't get the benefit of collective wisdom to help to surface the best ideas.
Beautifully said. Some mutual acquaintance of both of ours, Salim Ismail and Peter Diamandis, they've really talked a lot about how the world economies have made this dramatic shift over the last 1,000 years, 100 years to the decade we're in, from scarcity to abundance, right? So we had a period of thousands of years where most businesses that were formed were based on taking a good or service that's scarce and bringing that about. It could be energy, oil, natural resources, to education, learning, to transportation, to food. Things that were once very, very scarce are now very, very abundant. And then when we think about abundance, you go into a grocery store, there's a plethora of options to choose from. You go onto Amazon, there's thousands upon thousands of choices of products to buy. And so what really begins to differentiate which service or product for somebody is what they trust. And trust and transparency go hand in hand. The two are almost synonymous. But just curious if you have any thoughts about that based on this period of abundance that we're in and how critical it is for any company to have that trust with their consumers.
So I think that there's two sides of the abundance piece. So one is we're living in an incredible time, and for all of the negative information that can be in the news, we are living in, I think, the best time to be alive as humans. And when you look at the data around access to innovative technologies that support a flourishing human life, the data bears that out. That said, we're living in an era of an abundance of connection and information that becomes available to people. And it's much easier to tell the truth and keep the truth straight than to try to lie. And so the more that companies are forthright, transparent, clear in what they're doing, the more that they can gain the trust of the public. And for those companies and brands that have had trust in the past, if they work in underhanded ways, I do think that our world of the internet and easy access to information will surface that out, and that can really harm their brands. So the best way for a company to have a great brand in today's day and age with abundant information is to be forthright and transparent.
Well, PMA, positive mental attitude. I know I live it and breathe it every day. Every email I send, every text I send ends with that. So I couldn't agree more. We are in the best time ever to live. So with, taking that to the next step with transparency and AI, which, you're the general counsel for, one of the leading AI companies, Labelbox. A lot of people fear AI. When we say AI, we're talking about artificial intelligence. And a lot of people fear it because they fear that their jobs are going to be replaced, or they feel that there might be too much an intrusion of privacy. When, the data is revealing that we have more jobs available today than in the last 30, 40 years. There's 7 million jobs vacant, high-paying jobs that are vacant that are currently not fulfilled. Unemployment is at a 40, 50-year low. So, contrary to what, logic might be that artificial intelligence is going to replace the jobs, it's just the opposite seems to be happening. So how do you, being an expert in this area, how do you connect those dots of transparency and artificial intelligence? And to me, it's just going to bring about more and more transparency positively. The companies are going to have more data to be transparent internally with their own company and culture and employees and team members, and then be able to communicate openly and more accurately to their partners, to their vendors, to their clients. But just love to hear your thoughts on all that.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, we've had, we definitely align on positive mental attitude and looking at the future optimistically. I think we've each got a cell phone in our pockets that's more powerful than the computer that got us to the moon. How incredible is that? I mean, it's just, I walk through the world every day and I'm so thrilled and delighted and amazed at just the opportunities that we have. And with artificial intelligence in particular, I think there's actually a new dimension of transparency that artificial intelligence can bring for our society. So our artificial intelligence is a reflection of ourselves. It's a way of holding a mirror to ourselves in a way that was not before possible. And so when we create models based on data, those models tell us something about the data we feed into it. And if we do find that data is biased, it's a reflection of our world that is biased. And us knowing that, we can go in and actually include more data and end up with an algorithm that's less biased than what we started with. And we can in turn use that to help improve our world and bring our world to a better place. And so I think it's really, really important for companies to have a system of record for their data, to audit that data, and to augment their data to help to bring about better outcomes. And that's something that was not even possible before AI.
Amazing. You know, listen to you speak. I love that analogy of the mirror, looking at yourself in the mirror, and AI being able to help us better understand our views, our thoughts, our opinions, what we're saying. Because personal transparency is the most difficult thing, I believe, for a human being to do. The biggest breakthroughs I've ever had in my life, you know, when we had the financial crisis and I was overseeing $1 billion in assets, and I no longer knew if my clients' assets were safe, where they were custody, where they were held. You know, millions of jobs were being lost. I was so challenged with a lack of transparency in the financial market. But all of us have our own personal transparency story. And, you know, it goes back hundreds, thousands of years. We survived as humans by not being transparent. We had to camouflage ourselves in the bush from that lion or tiger, or from other humans, from other predators. And today, in a very short period of time, transparency is being demanded upon us. So I love that analogy of the mirror. So do you think the tools that are becoming more prevalent for us humans to use with AI are going to help us overcome those fears and give us more courage to be more personally transparent?
100%. I think a way in which this is very relevant and timely is when it comes to creating novel ways of curing disease. If we could share the data that's already out there about individual humans, their genomes, their disease, their expression in a free and transparent way, we could use artificial intelligence to cure almost any disease very quickly with the technology we already have. I truly think this. And right now, unfortunately, in part based on fear, medical data ends up siloed and very difficult for researchers to access. And that holds back our science and our medicine. And so I think the more that we can courageously come together, share data, be transparent, share information, the better results and outcomes we're going to have.
Well, you brought up such a great topic of transparency in health and transparency in DNA. You know, it doesn't seem too long ago, but it was when Craig Ventura mapped out the first human genome, right? It took them, over a decade and cost billions of dollars, where today you and I can have our entire DNA mapped out for less than $1,000. And in 5 years, it'll be less than $100. What's amazing is every state now requires every baby born in every hospital to have the DNA tested. And this has been occurring in some states like California since the 1980s. And that data is stored. But what's remarkable is if you go and you ask the average, woman that's pregnant with a baby, if it would be okay for the hospital to test and take the DNA, the child's DNA and store it, the fear goes up. The fear goes up as to how that DNA could be used to potentially harm their child in the future. But the reality is, it's required by every state now to test it. And there's over 1 million babies born a year worldwide that have a genomic defect that can be fixed immediately. And thousands of babies, our lives are saved through that. So amazing topic of DNA and transparency. So you're the general counsel of one of the top AI companies. and have a law degree from Yale. When you think of transparency in terms and in contracts, how do you think about that? How do you think about how to make a contract with clients, vendors, transparent enough that they can understand it, yet be able to cover the bases legally?
So I think, there's two dimensions here. With our company, it's a B2B company. So we work with businesses. And so those businesses will have their lawyers that will review our contracts. And so this is a different matter from companies that are contracting with individuals who don't necessarily have legal counsel to review their agreements with Uber or Facebook or other consumer facing companies. So I can't speak to this with regards to my work at Labelbox, but what I can say is that I think that the if folks were to embrace if the more that businesses embrace transparency and embrace the value of supporting their end users, the more that those contracts will be favorable to the end users. I do think that the transparency piece that's missing is a lot of companies have to get paid somewhere and somehow. And if you're not paying for a service, someone's paying for it. So if you're a consumer and you're using Google or Facebook for free, you should ask, well, who is paying them? And why are they paying them? And I think that Google and Facebook could do more to be more transparent about who and when and how and why they're getting paid, and potentially give an option for consumers to pay them directly.
Yeah, there's no free lunch, right? So if we download an app and the app is free, it's not costing us anything. As a consumer, we should be processing, okay, for that app to be serviced, for that app to be created, for that company to be in business, they're making money somehow. They're paying for the bills somehow. And it's probably through the utilization of my data. Is that an accurate, fair assessment?
That's right. And I think that, the challenge, Facebook makes our social relationships more transparent. It provides a tremendous amount of value. That said, I would love the opportunity to pay Facebook rather than have Facebook sell my data to advertisers. And Google also, these companies provide tremendous amounts of value. And I love that we have the technology revolution here in the US and that I think we benefit greatly from that. But also I'd love for us to have the option of understanding more about the business model of these companies and encouraging win-win scenarios for everyone.
Yeah. When when we talk about these topics, a lot of times people will gravitate immediately towards privacy and the lack of transparency of privacy. Apple is a transparency-based company. Apple has done a great job of articulating their privacy standards. You can go online and Google Apple privacy standards, and there they are. And they've been a leader, and now we're starting to see other companies adopt privacy standards. What role do you feel AI, artificial intelligence, will play in the privacy world and the creation of privacy standards? Do you think it's going to help facilitate and bring this to fruition or make it more challenging?
I think that it's important to have some dimension of privacy for a free society. And I think that can still be aligned with transparency. We can just be transparent about which matters are private and why. I don't think everyone needs to go into everyone's bedroom. I don't think everyone needs to see everybody's, college partying photos. And I don't think everyone needs to see the religious or political beliefs of everyone else in every instance. But I do think being transparent about the dimensions of life that we want to have private and the dimensions of life that we want to have public and what the costs and benefits are will really lead to better outcomes.
hmm Yeah, it's almost like being transparent builds more trust with privacy. So if you just tell your consumer, you tell your clients what the deal is, what you're doing with the data, what you're holding, what you're not, if you are selling it, then they can make that decision, that choice is going to bring and create more brand loyalty. I agree with everything you just said. I couldn't agree more. So blockchain, you are one of the top experts with blockchain technologies, Bitcoin. How do you think about transparency as it relates to blockchain technologies and digital assets like Bitcoin?
So I think blockchain technology is a revolution in how we share and store information. So just as double entry bookkeeping makes for much more transparent, higher quality books, you can think of blockchain technology as multi entry bookkeeping. So not just double entry, but you have many, many entries. And you don't need that for everything, but for places where you really want information secure and to be exact, it's very powerful for creating a network of trust among parties that otherwise might not trust each other. And so that's incredibly powerful for supporting coordination and cooperation among otherwise potentially competitive groups. And with Bitcoin in particular, everyone knows when tokens move on the network. So it's potentially even too transparent. If you have gold, you might not want everyone to know how much gold you have. If you have Bitcoin, folks can figure out how much Bitcoin is in each address and can do work to figure out to whom belongs each Bitcoin address. And so that means that there's just this incredible opportunity to have access to new levels of information with regard to these assets. The other piece about Bitcoin is you have transparency on how many of them there are. There's never going to be more Bitcoins. There's only 21 million maximum. Lots of those are lost. So maybe we're talking 17 million maximum. And so there's only so many Bitcoins, and we've got full transparency on that. Whereas, if you think about what happens with traditional monetary policy, there are going to be the government can decide to print more money within a not necessarily the most transparent way or in a way that the public doesn't understand. Now, all of that said, I think there's lots of room for traditional currencies as well, of course, but I do think there's benefits to these new forms of assets. Another piece is right now it can take multiple days for transactions to clear when we trade stocks, for example. If we could do that trading using digital asset-based system, we could have a much faster resolution period, and we would have transparency on what happened with the stock and when.
Wow, that is absolutely beautiful. Nathana, I think about the U.S. dollar and other currencies when I think of digital assets. I think of inflation. There's currently $13 trillion of debt worldwide that is a negative interest rate. Let's think about that. So there's $13 trillion of wealth, of people's money, that they lose money every single day. Negative interest rate. They lose money every single day by keeping it there. Whereas if you place your money into Bitcoin, you're not guaranteed to lose your money. Like, that's a guarantee. You're going to lose money being in a negative interest rate environment. And we saw the Fed cut rates. The 10-year Treasury bond has dipped below 1% for the first time ever. And so it certainly appears that here in the United States, we're headed in the same direction of negative interest rates. So when I think of negative interest rates where you're guaranteed to lose money on your dollar, I think of inflation, what has happened. The average life expectancy today is 80 years. And we've entered this exponential period of longevity. a baby born today, will live to over 100. And so if you take $1 80 years ago, today that dollar is worth about 3 cents. That's it. So when you take into account how the central banks can print all the money they want to print, and that's happened, and that's why $1 is now only worth $1 80 years ago is only worth 3 cents today. When you factor that in with the abundance, $13 trillion of debt that is now paying negative interest rates, one would think more and more liquidity will flow to one of the only inflation-proof investments, which is Bitcoin. How do you process and think about all that?
So I think it's a compelling case. I also think that we're living in very exciting and very strange times. So as you know from your time at Singularity, our world is changing exponentially, and it's so difficult for humans to wrap their heads around what that means. And even for me, I'm spending all my time thinking about artificial intelligence, working with companies on artificial intelligence, and I still think my timelines are aggressive, but I'm probably under predicting because of how fast this field is changing. And so what that means is that we're living in a world where I think what it will be like 30 years from now with regard to long-term treasuries or long-term bonds, so hard to imagine that world. And I think putting $1 to work on something innovative is so powerful. All of that said, I do think that your analysis is strong and makes me excited about Bitcoin. I think that the challenge for Bitcoin is the underlying technology is powerful, but as the technology develops and grows, there's the question of will it remain dominant or not? Will there be some new form of digital asset that actually works much better and could replace Bitcoin? And so I think that that's an existential risk for Bitcoin due to it being a computation-based asset that makes it that I think even though Bitcoin is deflationary, that existential risk is something that I think you have to price in when you think about valuing it.
Beautiful. Well, I just cannot thank you enough for all of your time. Your time is so precious. Congratulations on all your success. I am so fortunate to have the relationship with you that we have, Nathana. I feel very fortunate, very blessed. Thank you very much. And for the viewers listening, you all will be able to access all the podcasts by going to transparencywave.com. And thank you again so much, Nathana. Eternally grateful.
Thank you, Paul. You've got such a tremendously positive impact on my life and the lives of so many others. And I'm delighted that you're sharing your wisdom and your relationships with the world in this podcast. And such an honor to be a part of it.
Thank you. Cheers. So please subscribe on iTunes or Google Play Music to Defining Transparency. And you can purchase the book on Amazon, or you can go directly to the website transparencywave.com. Thank you very much.